Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my Grand Slam Journey podcast, where I, together with my guests, discuss various topics related to finding purpose, maximizing our potential, competitive sports, life after sports, and transitioning from one chapter of our lives to the next. If you want to learn about my podcast, please browse my personal website and blog at grandslamjourney.com, which is a collection of my passion projects. Also, I have received several messages from you, my listeners and friends, about how much you enjoy the podcast and content I create. I'm very grateful, and if you enjoyed this episode and listening to my podcast in general, please consider leaving a feedback on Apple Podcasts. You can submit a rating and add a commentary, which I will greatly appreciate. Today's episode is with Eliza Wong, an executive coach, founder of Always on Purpose, and writer of an upcoming new book named Living on Purpose: 5 Deliberate Choices to Realize Fulfillment and Joy. I was so excited when Amy sent me a reader's copy. I could not tear myself away from the book. What a fantastic, insightful, and educational read that I know will serve many. I met Amy during a Stanford Continuous Studies class that I took in the summer of 2020. Amy's class is called Conversational Intelligence: Increase Your Impact, which Amy still teaches and I highly recommend. Her class couldn't have come to me in a more serendipitous time. I go through several examples of my own journey during this podcast and the impact that Amy had on me during the 2-day course. Some of those examples demonstrate the choices that Amy writes about in her upcoming book, Living on Purpose. We discuss various topics, all revolving around Amy's book. We go through the 5 choices that Amy writes about to realize deeper fulfillment and joy. We discuss mindfulness practice and side effects of living on purpose. Amy claims that what we focus on determines how we feel, and it also works backward. How we're feeling is telling us what we're focusing on. We discuss the importance of honoring our feeling states as an indicator and not having resistance to them. Amy talks about how to take control of our own remote control and change the channel in our internal worlds to create a positive internal dialogue. Amy provides tips on how to navigate life in a more intentional and purposeful way, feeling out what happiness means to us and how to tune in to find it. On the opposite side, we also discuss some of the reasons why people are not satisfied and live empty and unfulfilling lives, despite that one might look like a success on a paper. Last but not least, Amy talks about the importance of following what feels inspiring and expansive, and the power of learning to recognize emotions as indicators of our focus, and how to become the directors of our focus. I haven't created any quotes for this episode, as all the quotes I would post are already in Amy's book. If you found this episode interesting and want to dive deeper, I highly suggest you to order Amy's book, Living on Purpose. You can pre-order it now on Amazon. The link is in the show notes. The new release day, based on communication I received from Amy this morning, is May 24th. Note, this is an updated date from the one discussed in the podcast, as the book release day was delayed since the recording due to, unsurprisingly, logistics issues caused by the pandemic. And now, enjoy the listen. Thank you so much for accepting my podcast invitation and being my guest. I have had you in mind ever since I met you 1.5 years ago during a class, Conversational Intelligence, that you taught at Stanford Continuous Studies. And I'm just so glad that timing aligned, and we have a fantastic book that you're launching, you've written, and it's about to come out. So super thrilled to talk about that and how we met and many of other things. But before I dive in, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Clara, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm really excited for the conversation we're about to have. So my name's Amy Wong, and I am a leadership coach. I partner with executives, leaders, and teams on all things growth, transformation, and thriving. And one of my areas of expertise and true passions is all things communication, like all aspects of communication. And so whether that's from public speaking and executive presence to team dynamics to interpersonal or interaction dynamics, it just enthralls me. And really, mainly, it's the art and the science of building and sustaining trust. And so really, and if I were to be very honest, the reason I'm so invested in this medium of communication is because communication, our conversational styles, our communication style, our conversational patterns and behaviors, all this stuff that's happening. And really, and this stuff is so important because this is where everything happens. And so everyone's invested in this medium. We don't think about it that way, but the truth is none of us live in a vacuum. We're not creating impact in a vacuum. It's all happening by virtue of this medium called communication. And for me, this medium, this thing called communication, really truly is a symptom. It's an effect for each and every one of us. It's a symptom of the relationship we have with ourselves. And so if we are super invested in our growth, and if we want to catalyze true transformative shift and, transformation for ourselves and our impact, we have to get to the root level. And that root level, that perceptual lens that's created, that fundamental perceptual lens that's created, that is determined by our relationship with self, that's really where it's at. But communication is a very powerful entry point and a very informative entry point to that work. So for me, as a professional, this from the roots to communication, from communication to the roots, the relationship we have with ourselves, it's all related and it's the world I live in. I am so passionate about it. So that's me on a professional level. And on a personal level, I'm married to my best friend. I've been almost 16 years and we've got two amazing children, a son who's 13, a daughter who's 9, and live in Berkeley, California, and just living a miracle every day.
I love the intro. Thank you, Amy. I love how you started with the communication because it ties to obviously my experience and how I met you and makes so much sense even as a background to the book and what we're going to dive into some of the questions. And I do want to state, I so highly suggest anyone to take your conversational intelligence class. I've recommended it actually to 2 or 3 friends who took it and they all came to me. I was like, oh my God, thank you, Amy, so amazing. And you can just see when somebody creates things with passion, and we're going to dive into it because that's almost manual in your book. You're right. How to connect with your passion and really find what you enjoy doing and what do you want to spend your time and energy on, because it resonates. People, when they attend the class and they see how passionate you are, it's just such a different impact, even though these classes are virtual. Like, oh my gosh, Amy has so much energy. It's like you can feel it coming from the screen. So that's been the couple feedbacks I've gotten. My friends came back. I was like, thank you for recommending the class. You can just sense how special that experience has been for them, even and just how much energy you can radiate even in this virtual environment. So
that means a lot. Thank you, Clara.
And maybe that ties into the always on purpose. Could be just a good intro. Even when I took your class, I know you had a website and there was your email domain. It's always on purpose. And
that's right.
I was thinking, what does it mean? So maybe give listeners background. What does it mean to live on purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. So I founded Always on Purpose. That's the name of my practice. Founded it in 2011. So I've been doing this for about 10 years now. My book is called Living on Purpose. And so they're really intrinsically tied. In preview, the second book I'm going to be writing is going to be Leading on Purpose. So excited about that. But right now, what we're getting out in the world is living on purpose. So that is a roadmap for true fulfillment and joy. And we'll get to that later, but always on purpose as a concept. Why did I choose this name? What does it actually mean? If you just think about that, to be always on purpose, just notice how that feels, even without having a conceptual or intellectual understanding of what it means in its strict definition. everyone that hears it, it's like, yeah, it's like to be always on purpose. Like that just feels right. And so we have to ask, what's that about? Where is that relief? Where is that fulfillment coming from? And what I believe to be true is that always on purpose is a state of being. It is a state of being and a practice where we hold a mindset and we exercise true choice in our moments more often than not. Because most of us are living partially asleep. Most of us are in autopilot mode. And it makes perfect sense. We are bombarded with so much stimulus. If you've seen Social Dilemma, you get it, right? We are completely overwhelmed with stimulus. And so it's really easy to numb out. And when we numb out, we're not the true creators of our life. What ends up happening is we start reacting to life. We start thinking, and this sounds way more extreme than I mean, but just being victim to the conditions around us. And we begin to just automatically, involuntarily start to make interpretations and overlay meaning on the stuff of life that doesn't always serve us. And so to be always on purpose is to really decide, I'm going to make my life what I want it to be by virtue of how I choose to interpret this, how I choose to perceive this, how I choose to believe. And it's really being in the driver's seat. And last, I'll say you've heard of that quote, life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. It is a deliberate and intentional shift to choose that. And people might say, oh, well, that's so overly optimistic. And that's all just so Pollyanna, like, well, life's happening for you. Well, you know what? It's a choice. What we choose to perceive, we create for ourselves. And so why not live as if everything is here for us, for our health, growth, and our wholeness? Like, why not? And so to be always on purpose is that incredibly non-resistant state of being that is truly the essence of joy and meaning. And it's a practice, right? So first you have to decide to do this, and then it's a practice. And so in the book, Living on Purpose, I dive into how to really take that on if this is of interest.
Thank you. And I love how you dived into the choosing, because that's one of the questions I had here. Reading the book, you frame them, you go through 5 choices and sort of manuals how to go deeper into the choices and really make that deliberate choice. And when I read it, that's one of the things I really loved. It's how you choose to live and what you choose to create. Yeah. So thank you for choosing that choose word. It really was so empowering. And when I was reading it, it was like, it's what we choose is how we interpret things.
That's right.
And it was fantastic. Maybe I'll give a little bit of background on the book when I read it. Thank you so much for sending me the manuscript. It was fantastic. It pulled me in. I love the vulnerability you described, your own experiences, the depth with which you dove into that and really was able to articulate so nicely. The book reads very easily and pull me into experience almost what you were going through in those specific moments. I love the examples. Obviously, you draw a lot on your experience as a coach. So the examples you've given from your coaching practice, and even if nothing else, the great questions you pose and ask. So with like a manual, I think there are just some fantastic guiding questions for anybody who wants to dive into that you can dive deeper into, uncover the different layers of yourself. And I think last but not least, and this is something I really loved about your conversation intelligence class, was the science-based approach you take and how you build on the science. And it's just, for my logical brain, it's like this, you got to break the logical barrier first for me to be able to dive deeper. And so that really just resonated with me and allowed me to dive deeper, because it's always based on the biology and science and how our body feels things, responds to what's happening around, to then be able to move into the choice.
Wow. Thank you, Clara. That delights me to receive that reflection. So thank you. I'm just like you. I'm having been a math major, from Berkeley. It's like, give me some really sound logic and then I'll consider it. So that's exactly my approach with the book. There's some powerful, very subjective suggestions, but I think it's helpful to have powerful arguments to back up those suggestions. So yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. That really works. And I know we'll dive into meditation, but I wrote it here. I want to just add one more thing. You talk in your book about meditation and importance of creating time for yourself. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because the book really created almost this meditative state for me. So I typically like reading books in the evening because it's a nice way, as you mentioned, from in front of a screen all day. So it's a really nice way to kind of calm down and transition from the craziness of the notifications and reminders all day to just kind of fall asleep. For whatever reason, I loved your book reading first thing in the morning when I woke up.
Wow, thank you.
Really, I read it through 4 or 5 days. Like in the morning, I started and I grabbed my cup of coffee and
I am honored. Clara, I'm
excited to read Amy's book. So it was a fantastic start of my day. Thank you for that. And
wow, thank you so much. Yeah, that morning time is it is sacred to me. I feel like there is so much potential in those morning hours when you're just waking up, when you choose to harness those first waking moments and that first period in an intentional way. I think it just sets us up for so much flow and success for the rest of the day. So
yes,
thank you. Yeah,
actually, that's exactly, you described it. I think what I felt like it was a really nice start of the day. Like for me, reading your book, it sort of set my mindset into this like fun and relaxed mode. By the same time, I guess to some degree, the living on purpose. It was a great way to start my day. It's like, how do I want to claim the day today? And there were some great tips, obviously, in the book. So maybe that's why it just worked that way for me.
Awesome.
And I thought a lot about our podcast, and I have so many topics to discuss, probably 5 pages, including 4 of just quotes that I pulled from your book that I thought were fantastic. And to begin with, maybe I thought one of the best ways could be with the impact you had during the conversational intelligence class when I took. And for the listeners in the audience, I haven't talked about this experience much. And it's something I have heavily tried to put in a box and move over. You have seen my emotional outburst in the class, which is something I was embarrassed of after a while because I hate emotions. I hate feelings. I am very logical. And as a former athlete, I've been trained to box emotions, right? On the tennis court, when you're in the split moment, you just got to focus being present, allowing your body to move, following up on the instructions that hopefully your body knows, but emotions do not serve you. If you become overly emotional one way or another, the game's going to go bad. So just to give it as a background, for that reason, I just don't like to live in extreme emotional ways. And your class came to me in such a serendipitous time. Like I could not pick a better time to take your class because that a period of a week or 10 days, I have been drowning in cortisol. And I didn't even know about it. I was like, oh my God, what's happening to me? Yeah. I was so stressed by the situation and what was happening. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think clearly. I was so consumed in that moment and just the circumstances. It has never happened to me in my life to such a degree. And my logical brain was saying, you're safe, you're okay. Like, why are you scared? This person, let's call him Bob for the storytelling, can't hurt you. He is very far away. There's no threat, but my amygdala was so hijacking. And I was such an awful housemate. And just to add, I was sweating through shirts during the day. Like I had to change like 3 or 4 shirts.
Wow.
So, sorry to describe, this sounds disgusting. But to paint the picture, this cortisol sweat, it's just very stinky sweat. It's different than even workout sweat. Yeah. So your class and just the fact in the first day that I realized, this is normal. It's a biological response. Don't try to fight it.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first thing that I needed to hear to just like move forward, like acknowledge it. It's fine. And move forward. So I wanted to state this as a background because I think we can build on this experience as we go through the choices.
Yeah.
I wish I got this book 1.5 years ago, although now it's fantastic even looking back. But I literally had gone through a lot of the choices during that 1.5 years time from that experience that now I look at as the best thing that could have happened to me. Obviously, back then it was very stressful.
Yeah.
But maybe it ties into the book. The first choice you describe is choose to feel it out, not figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
That's so connected.
That's right.
To the experience. And that feeling in that moment was obviously awful, but that allowed me to sort of, okay, this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
And then be more realistic on how to move forward from that. So I know I said probably way too much. I just wanted to lay out the background.
Wonderful.
But what is your perception? Choose to feel it out, not figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so that it's clear for anyone who's listening, the book's, it's titled Living on Purpose, but the subtitle is 5 Deliberate Choices to Realize Fulfillment and Joy. And so, these 5 choices, following these 5 choices, and it's not that it's linear, you can go in any order, but they're presented in a certain fashion so that it's easy to consume. But the first one is feel it out, don't figure it out. And so thank you, Clara, for really setting that up because, contextually, it's really makes for a rich discussion here. So thank you for that. Now, this is, in short, I'm going to point back to something you mentioned. You don't like emotions. You don't want to feel, you hate emotions. You've been trained to not listen to them. And I would say as a society, I think that's overwhelmingly true. We're not taught to honor our emotions, and in fact, we get made fun of. We're called too sensitive. We're a wimp. We're too emotional. And so we've got this negative context to our feeling states. And what I firmly believe is that our feeling states are so important because they are indicators. They are signals that are arising as a result of the focus that we are choosing. Straight up. It's the focus that we are choosing. Like, for example, if you're going to turn on the TV, say at the end of the day, you want to relax and you turn on the TV and let's say this is before streaming services, right? And so the TV turns on to whatever channel that was last on and up pops horror, chainsaw, or whatever those really horror-y, gory movies. Like imagine that pops up and here you are, you want to relax. Like that's the last thing you want. You have this visceral reaction. You're like, oh my God. So what do? You change the channel. I'm like, done. Okay, easy. Oh, okay, I don't want to watch that because that makes me feel horrible. And so then maybe you turn it to the news and you're like, oh, that's no better. And so then you turn it to planet Earth and you're like, look at these lovely dolphins. This is lovely. So what we know is that when we focus on a screen, that whatever we're inputting, whatever we're focusing on, it absolutely determines how we feel. And so it kind of works backwards. So how we're feeling is telling us what we're focusing on. And what's fascinating to me is that all of us know this to be true with our remote control, and we have full agency to change the channel on a TV. We completely forget about our internal worlds. And what's happening is for most of us, if we're feeling anxious, if we're feeling sad, if we're feeling angry, I'm going to guarantee you're on a channel that's not serving you. But what's happening is you don't recognize that you have a remote control. And so it's almost akin to, here you are, you turn on the TV, horror, and then our internal states, it's like this. Oh, I have to watch it because it's on. And so you slug yourself through it simply because it's on the TV, and then you feel worse. But you wouldn't do that. And so here we are in our internal worlds, our focus. We do have that ability to change the channel, but it takes honoring our feeling states as an indicator and not to have resistance to it, to really appreciate them. And so that's the first step. But the deeper conversation about feel it out, don't figure it out, It's a way of navigating life, and it's a way of navigating in a very intentional, very purposeful way. So here's the backstory. Everything we want, everything we think we want, whether it's more money, whether it's a promotion, whether it's a new, bigger house, whether it's a relationship, everything that you want, it's actually not for the thing. You want it because you think it's going to make you feel a certain way. So really what we want is a feeling state that's not current. It's an improved feeling state, but we never think about it that way. And I am certain it's because of the conditioning of our educational system. And what happens, we are trained, we are rewarded to follow a formula. Go to school, do well, get good grades, get into a good college, do well, get a good job, make a certain amount of money, get a good title, and then you'll be happy. But we don't even ask, like, well, what does that happiness mean? And so we completely divorce ourselves from feeling and start chasing the thing. And we get really good about chasing the thing. And that's what it means to figure it out. Let me get this, let me get that, let me do this. And we never really complete the map and say, well, I'm doing the thing for feeling of impact, for feeling of significance. No, we don't take it all the way and we stop at the thing. So then we get the thing and then we wonder why we're hollow. We're like, great, got the promotion. This feels good for 2 days. And then it's like, okay, what's next? And we never feel fully satisfied. And so for most of us ambitious professionals, we get to a certain point in our life and we look at our life and we say, oh my gosh, my life is amazing on paper. Why do I feel like it's not complete? Why do I feel like something's missing? And it's simply because we've been chasing the thing. We have been figuring it out, how to get the thing. And we haven't been following what feels amazing. And so anyone listening, if there was ever that point in your life where maybe it was art and you just felt so much flow and you couldn't get enough and you were studying these artists and you were trying these techniques and it was just clicking on all levels and you felt alive and you felt just invincible and a loss of time and that feeling of just invigoration. But you were told, well, that's not going to get you anywhere. Take these engineering classes, do these things. And so you numbed yourself to that incredible inspired feeling because of a suggestion, because of influence of others, because it wasn't the formula. And so then therefore you start chasing the thing and I've lost that. So to feel it out, it's not to chase the thing. To feel it out is to follow that feeling that gives you that inspired. It's almost like a big, amazing breath in. It's almost as if the air got knocked into you, like when you think about it. Mm-hmm. It's the stuff that you instinctively just want to raise your hand and lean into. It's the stuff that you just have such an interest that you could talk all day about it. It's the stuff that you find yourself leaning into it and learning more. You find yourself learning it quickly, more quickly than, say, other people. It's the stuff that you fall into a flow. And those experiences, those opportunities hit us throughout the day. But because we haven't taught ourselves how to listen for those, we usually gloss right over it and stay the course of the plan. But what I'm arguing here, and I'm living proof, and my clients are living proof, that when you shift your way of navigating and you start following the feeling, as illogical as it might seem, that's when there's a true unlock. That's when there's flow. That's when there's joy. That's when there's true meaning and fulfillment. But it takes a leap of faith because people have been taught, we've all been taught, oh, well, that's not going to get you anywhere. Just because you like to sing doesn't mean you'll get a Grammy one day. Right. And so that's really what this first choice is all about.
Thank you. That's fantastic background. And I have so many thoughts and reactions. Maybe the top of mind so resonated with me, even in the book, how you described the society standards and what society calls as a success versus slowing down to really figure out what is success for us. And that's where you're pointing, feel it out. And the feelings can be, I think that's the scary part. feelings are kind of messy, right? Or for me, they are. It's like, what's going on here? It seems like it can feel like, at least for me, that I'm out of control, like feelings are ruling me. But once you figure out to slow down, especially important life choices, and I've given this example, I think, on my previous podcast with Arena, being so logical, especially very high important choices I've been trying to make. I've always made like Excel spreadsheet, and I created my criteria, like even jobs, buying a car, maybe buying a car. Actually, that might be a good example, but taking a new job is not a thing you can figure out via like average or mean average and a number that comes at the bottom with how you rate different criteria. Like it's a feeling it out thing.
Yeah.
So actually, funny thing, when my new opportunity came about, I've actually had in the same time about 3 job offers that aligned in 3 to 4 weeks, including staying where I was at and continuing with the journey that I've already created for myself and put a lot of effort in my previous company that I worked for. And so one of the things, I've had a coach at the time, she was like, sit and just connect. What does your gut tell you?
Yeah.
I was like, I don't have a gut. I've never been used to listen to my gut. So that was so hard. I like sit on my meditation cushion for like 30 minutes. I put on my relaxing music, and actually my tears started running down my face about 15 minutes through. And after 30 minutes, I was like, okay, this is what I should do. Take this new opportunity. And it's been a fantastic journey. I guess all that said, I'm sure there's a lot of other people that are like, oh my gosh, feelings, emotions, they're awful. I mean, how do I feel it out? It's so scary.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips or encouragement how to overcome that?
There's so much to say with that. I think the coach in me wants to naturally and immediately go to the question, well, let's explore the reasons that it's scary. Like, what is it that we're actually scared of? So let's do this, Claire. We'll be totally logical. I think you'll appreciate this. Okay. Our emotions are experiences, but as an emotion, it literally is a map in our brain. Oh, this is anxiety. This is hesitation. This is despair. This is anger, right? Because what's really going on with an emotion, each emotion that we're having is truly a signature set of sensations in our body. So happiness and enthusiasm, I might get this fluttering in my stomach. I might feel this buzziness in my chest. I might feel energy running through my arms. I might feel this lightness in my head. And that set of sensations maps to my brain. And I have said, okay, this is happiness. This set of sensations is wanted. But then say anxiety might be, okay, I'm getting this clenching in my gut. I'm getting this rapid heartbeat. I'm getting the sunken shoulders. I'm getting a tightness in my face. And so we say, okay, this set of sensations is not wanted. And this is not great. And we have a relationship to that. But really the question for me is, okay, these are just a signature set of sensations. What's the resistance? Where does that come from? And does it have to be this way? So I think looking at it logically first and just saying like, what's this resistance to emotions about? Could I just look at this as indicators in the same way that I would easily flip the channel if I didn't want to watch Rachel Ray, right? Like flip, no thanks, not what I'm in the mood for right now. Like in the same way I'd flip the channel, could we look at these emotions as, oh, okay, this is just an indicator of my focus. So I think really examining, and I think everyone's going to have a different answer to like, what does it mean? What does this resistance, where does this come from? Is it cultural conditioning? Is it from my family? Is it because I was punished for being sad all the time? And so now I've got this bad relationship to sadness. And so I've associated rejection with sadness, which is more triggering than one can imagine. And so it's like, okay, I better avoid that, not going there. And so we learn to numb ourselves, but to really just look at it and say, is this serving me? I mean, could there be more if I related to my emotions in a different way? I think that's one approach, is to be inquisitive and to really look at this somewhat objectively. And then second, and I'll offer this to you, Clara, and to everyone on the call, on my website, you'll be able to download, to heighten your self-awareness, which is heightening the sensitivity to how you feel. Because If we can heighten the sensitivity to what's going on in our feeling states, we're more apt to shift our focus because we recognize like, oh, okay, this is feeling a little off. Oh, it's because I'm totally rehashing this scenario 2 days ago. Got it. Change the channel. And so if we can heighten the sensitivity to our feeling states, and why do we need to do that? Well, either we've numbed ourselves to them, right? Or we've conditioned ourselves to being tolerant of feeling crappy. Like so many of us become conditioned and tolerate a low level feeling of anxiety. And it becomes like the hum of the refrigerator. We don't even notice it because we're so used to it. But it's simply because we have learned to tolerate feeling crappy. So you have to just say, okay, well, I don't want to feel crappy anymore. So you have to decide to be intolerant of feeling crappy, which means I got to catch it. I got to catch when I'm feeling this feeling. So on my website, you can download a little handout. It's strengthening your self-awareness. But what it is, it's a simple text-based practice where you text me and you have the option of either me texting you back twice a week or once daily. And what you'll get is a 30-second, less than that, maybe even 10-second, depends on how deep you want to reflect, 10-second to 30-second questionnaire, anonymous, to help you identify very granularly, what are you feeling in this specific moment? Like right now with me, Clara, like if you were to be super granular, what emotion would you say that you're feeling? Like what feeling state are you feeling right now in this moment?
Oh, I'm just super excited and inspired by all you're sharing.
I love that. See, I love that. And I love how you went granular. You said inspired. That's a beautiful word. That's a wonderful vibration, which is more specific than say good, right? Because most of us say, I feel good, I feel bad, I feel happy, I feel sad. And that's it. And we stop there. But if we really want to begin to live on purpose and really be the creators of our life, which means the directors of our focus, we have to be a little more sensitive to this. Yeah. So I love that. You're right. It's fun. Like inspired. Great. So if this is interesting, definitely go to alwaysonpurpose.com. In the resources section, you'll see you can sign up for this. And it's really quite fun. A lot of my clients have really appreciated this because it strengthens that muscle.
Thank you. I'll definitely check it out and I'll add a link to it in the show notes as well. Wonderful. So people can easily find it. Thank you for the tip.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next choice and building on the story that I have shared. I guess one of the things, or at least specifically me, I should talk about myself only, was also the judgment I had about having those feelings alone. It was judgment about myself. It's like, oh my God, why am I so weak? I always considered myself resilient. And I've had examples of my resiliency that I thought like built in. I don't shake down. I don't fall down from anything. I just get up and forget and kind of move on. That's my type of personality. So I was a lot shaken by just my own physical reaction and my inability of the logical brain to override what my body, kind of the body response. So I think with that, there was a lot of judgment that I was holding against myself. And what you described, the shooting, like choose to know that there is no way things or you should be.
Yes.
So it's like, oh, I should be stronger. I should be just, why don't you just move on, Clara? Like, what's going on? Or I should have helped all these other people that, you know, there's this a crazy situation. Why shouldn't I have seen this? I'm typically good at reading people and judgment. So I love that section in the book. And I think it's so powerful. Please tell us more about it.
Yeah. Oh, Claire, this is one of my favorite conversations is on the word should. There's so much to talk about here. And so high level, the word should, when you just hear it, you should work out. You should be nicer to your mom. You should call your parents more. You should be better at vacuuming the house. Like should. How does it make you feel? Horrible, right? It makes you feel burdened. It makes you feel guilty. And so then you have to ask, okay, well, should according to who? And then you think about it and you're like, should according to me? It's like, well, why would I do that to myself? But then you look into it deeper and then you're like, okay, well, where did that come from? So here it is. Should implies a fixed reality out there that is the ideal reality, that in order to live the good life, to be the good person, to do it quote unquote right, you got to line yourself up with that objective reality. And there you go. But the truth is, there is no standard. I mean, it's silly, but it almost implies that there's this big book of should up in the sky. That if you're going to be the good person, live the good life, you got to do it just like this. But there is no big book in the sky. There is no standard objective that we need to line ourselves up to in order to live an authentic life. And this is where I'll get super philosophical, but you think about it, it's like people might say, well, hold on. Isn't it true that there are some truths like we shouldn't kill each other? And I'll say, okay, hold on here. We don't know anything about existence. We know nothing. Like I can't even say for certain, Clara, that you exist. Really, I haven't met you in person. I've met you over a screen, right? But then beyond that, you are in my perception. My 5 senses take this in and my brain says you exist. Now, we're in agreement that you exist. And I like this idea that you exist. And I believe that that's true. But do we know for certain? No, you don't know for certain that I exist, but we're in agreement that I do. And so what happens here is that there is no objective truth that we can rest on other than I exist. I am. Because we're having a direct experience of ourselves. Okay. So I know this sounds super philosophical, but just stay with me here. Okay. So here we are. That's the only thing we can truly assert. Now, on top of that, what do? We create agreements. And now we've got agreements. Now I'm in agreement that we don't want to be killing each other. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm in agreement that I'm going to treat you in the way that I want to be treated. I'm in agreement that I'm going to take care of the earth so that we can leave it in a healthy, good place for the future generations. I'm in agreement of these things, right? But is it because of a set standard that we need to align to? No. Okay, so this whole thing about should, we hold ourselves underwater because of this imaginary standard that we try to align to. And then we live a life unfulfilled and in an emotional state that isn't fun, right? That feeling of burden is not great. And so, I mean, just feel the relief in this statement. There is no way things should be. Oh my God, there is no way this should go. There is no way this proposal should be written. There is no way this should play out. There is no way I should show up. There is no way. There's just the way it is. So you get to choose. Does it work? Great. If it doesn't, take the feedback and try again. But this whole idea that we somewhat unconsciously try to line up to a standard is truly an unfulfilled life. And so that is the topic of choice 2. And it gets really fun. There's a lot I bring to the conversation because, as you know, it's a word, but there's still so much going on underneath that word. But at a surface level, I would say this can be a big unlock for people. Oh, right. There is no way you should be. There is no way you should do this. There is no way this should have happened. Mm-hmm. And so judgment, the reason it feels so bad is because it is completely predicated on the word should. Now, judgment is very different than discernment. And this is it's a very important topic, trying to make that distinction between judgment and discernment. But judgment completely aligns to this idea that there's an invisible standard that we need to align to that is just baloney. But discernment, right? So we do need to assess and sift and sort amongst all the things of life. And discernment is just a way of saying, okay, this is left and this is right. But judgment says this is right and this is wrong. So it's judgment's value laden, but again, value laden up against this imaginary standard.
Yeah, I love it. I was just looking. One of the quotes I have here actually from the book on discernment is the art and skill that will help you to bridge between tolerating and living.
Yeah.
I copy pasted from your book. I was like, I should put it somewhere on the wall. I love it. I agree. And I do agree the should is just, it's been, at least for me, I wish I learned it 15 years ago when I was an athlete, because there's so many situations, especially in an athletic performance, you always have goals. So I think that's an easy example. This ball should have gone here. I should have hit it there. Like, it's just so easy. And drowning in the should it doesn't allow you to move on, at least for me. Like it kind of holds you back. So even from being a former athlete, I feel like okay, it is what happened, just move on. What's the next point? I think that's often the mistake, really anyone, but I think athletes just take it. It's very black and white because there is this very clear measurement. It's in or out, you win or lose. So right. It's a really nice way to measure things and realize whether you're living in the should world or is there an easier way if you let go of it?
Yeah.
How much easier it is to move on and perform better the next day. And it seems like you can explore more, iterate more, and really appreciate your failures more, because then you lose the judgment from the failures, but you can just take them as a real experiences. That's where you learn when you're moving over your failures. It's like, what can I learn from this instead of
that's right,
beating ourselves up?
The bigger story is I look at this in a very objective sense. And really, this is all about flow, the difference between resistance and flow. And should is nothing but resistance. And the opposite of that is flow. And what happens in flow? We ideate better. We can innovate more. All that stuff. So absolutely.
And you talk quite a bit in your book about the resistance and even procrastination. This was interesting. You said, honor your procrastination. Don't resist it. Can you tell us more about that?
Procrastination. So when you really think about feeling it out and not figuring it out, if we choose to honor our feelings, then we're going to be listening and feeling for the feeling of inspiration and insight, which is a very expansive and generative experience. And in my experience and in my opinion, and what I talk about here in the book is that following that generative, expansive feeling always leads to thriving. It leads to abundance. It leads to flow. It leads to joy, right? And this isn't woo-woo stuff. It's just true. And so that feeling is open and it's expansive. And when we follow it, it's the path of least resistance. We're right timing. We run into folks. Synchronicity happens. It's pretty fun. But then when we've got this feeling of, and there's some hesitation and some constriction, when we're trying to make decisions, when we've got things on our plate, and there's that feeling of constriction, I always honor that as, this probably isn't the path of least resistance here. So what if this is me on some level telling me that this isn't the way to go just yet? The ideas aren't there. The person you need to meet is going to be next week. The book you need to read will come across your desk after you attend this seminar, right? Like I really honor that constriction as a signal. Like, okay, flow isn't available just yet. So I'm going to hold back. I'm not going to feel bad for my lack of motivation. I'm not going to feel bad for my lack of inspiration on this thing. And so I'm not going to focus on it, because if I want this to come to fruition, I fully trust that it will. But right now in this moment, if I'm feeling this, chances are it's just not the right time. And so then I shift my focus to something that does feel of flow. And then lo and behold, without fail, at some point, something amazing happens. And then it's like, oh, and then this person, and or there's a shift, or there's a change in the trajectory. It feels like magic. And so the next thing I know, the thing that needed to get done gets done with less time, with less effort, in a better way than I was thinking. And it leads to some transformed output that is better than the expectation I held. But it takes honoring those feelings. And this is really what it means to feel it out. Because if you're going to feel it out and follow the feeling of inspiration, that means then you also have to honor the feelings of constriction. Okay, well, I'm going to listen to that. If I shift my focus, and let's just see how this plays out. And without fail, I mean, it always, always, always comes together. It's really, truly phenomenal. But it's a leap of faith. You really have to take a leap of faith in order to play this game. But when you do, oh my goodness, there is nothing better. Nothing better.
Yeah. Go into the next choice. Choose to know that it's always working out for you.
Yeah. Sort
of what I'm hearing you say and reading the book. It seems if you're brave enough to honor your feelings and dive deep, at least means for me, and you get rid of your should as the triggers of judgment, then really what you're left with, it seems like just trust that it will work out.
Yeah. This can be a hard one for folks because, their experience has said, well, what I experienced it for, no one should ever experience that. And so how can I say that it's working out for me?
Yeah.
And so this is where duality really comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So this plane of existence that we are in, it's all completely built upon this concept of duality, right? We cannot have light without dark. We cannot have birth without death. We cannot have up without down. And we have this spectrum of emotions where we cannot have happiness without sadness. And it's just how it works. And the process of growth, the process of evolution, we are on a continual path of transformation, of growing, of evolving. But it doesn't happen in the light the whole time. I mean, think about the creative process, right? If you want to grow an oak tree, it's got to start as a seed deep in the ground, and it's dark and it's stinky.
Yes.
And if you're going to give birth to a child, it's going to start out in the womb, and you got to go through childbirth. Stuff hurts. I mean, I've had 2 children.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an otherworldly experience. It's not unwanted, but man, is that intense.
Yes.
So growth, we tend to think we just want to be growing in the light and it feels good. But the truth is that's never the case. We grow equally in the light and in the dark. And most often it's those dark moments that truly, truly catalyze evolution, transformation, growth, and wisdom. And so we just have to decide that that's true because we're not getting around it. I'm sorry, but growing pains hurt. Labor pains hurt. Yeah. Teething hurts. So we can't get away from this idea that pain, as we think of it, is unwanted, that pain is not a part of the process. And now, are there experiences that are truly like otherworldly painful? Of course. And on the flip side, are there experiences that are otherworldly blissful? Yes. And so that's what this experience here on Earth we have access to, is this incredible spectrum of experience due to this duality. And I'm thinking of a quote from Oprah: the bigger the fall, the bigger the bounce. And so when we think about when we go through dark moments, to the degree that we go through the dark and the pain, on the other side of that is the degree of the high. You're an athlete. You know how pole vaulting works. If you got a pole vaulter, you got to get really low in order to get really high. And if you don't get low enough, you can't get high enough. And that's just the nature of reality. And so if we decide that this is true, then we can take a look at our life and say, okay, whatever comes, comes. And what if it's all in service to my growth? Because how many times will we go through an experience that's really awful, and in the moment, it's just crap, and it feels horrible, and it feels bad. And it's in the future that we look back and we say, oh, hey, I remember back in the day, oh God, I went through that and the boss was horrible. And oh, it was so painful. And oh God, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have this, and I wouldn't have that, and I wouldn't have done this, and I wouldn't have done, and I wouldn't be here. And so in almost every case, we look back with appreciation, and we can look back and say, you know what, that really served me. And in most cases, not all, most cases we'd say, I wouldn't have it be any different. And so if we do this, which we tend to do, then why not just decide now that it's working out for me? Because if you know that in the future, you're going to look back and go, well, yeah, actually, this served me, then why not completely harness that crap moment and turn it into manure, right? Manure stinks, but man, it makes beautiful blossoms.
Yes.
Right? Oh my gosh. If we talk about fish fertilizer, I don't know if you garden, my husband gardens. Man, fish fertilizer smells like death. It's awful, but my gosh, it's amazing for the garden. And so, sometimes you can be in the midst of that kind of ickiness, but what if it's fish fertilizer? It is. And so to create more flow for oneself and shift one from a feeling of constriction and negativity to one of appreciation. I mean, that is one of the biggest shifts we can do in a moment,
right?
Which really leads to a life of joy, meaning, and fulfillment. but it's in a moment. And so that's really, it really means to decide that it's always working out for you. Because what's the alternative? That it's not? Well, that's not fun. That's like being on the worst channel that you can be on.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Right. But it's a choice. It's a choice.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. You just said so much. I love this section as well, and connecting it to my story.
Yeah.
It perfectly ties to the start that I open up with, right? Because at that moment, I thought the world is ending.
Yeah.
And my ego thought the world is ending. I knew it's not, but
Right.
this identity I had so tied to who I was and the situation that I found myself in that totally threatened my self-judgment evaluation, kind of in this ego thinking brain is like, oh, what if all this work you've put in the past number of years now just is gone? Like your reputation of, whatever, like it was a storm of reactions. And like now looking back, I totally feel like I've overreacted. And without that overreaction, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. It was one of the best experiences I've gone. And it just so worked out. Just the path that experience opened up for me.
Yeah.
I actually should call that person and say thank you, because it was just
right? Isn't
it was
amazing?
just such a fantastic experience, and just the evolution where I've gotten. I feel I've gotten so much smarter and really moved me to a new world.
Yeah.
And actually brought onto the choose to know that you are already complete.
Yeah.
That's your next choice.
Yeah.
Because as I mentioned, the example, I was assigning my self or self-worth to something else external. And we often do that. Oh, you gave an example. If I get the next, I've been there myself. If I just get this promotion, I'm going to be worthy, the hierarchy of society. Well, my mom will be proud. So we all assign these things to ourselves, but it's just, if we believe there's nothing else, if you know you're already worth, then there aren't outside things or people that can shake you.
Right.
No matter what others say, I'll just move on. That's your own opinion. There's a bunch of other people who have others. But I love these two last choices. I just want to open up for you. Yeah. Choose to know that you already are complete. And the last one, I don't know if you want to discuss each separately, or choose to know, not believe your worth.
Yeah. Well, these two work together. And these two last choices, in my experience, this is the epitome of freedom. Truly the epitome of freedom. And because most of our waking moments, without knowing about it, most of our waking moments are built around needing to prove ourselves. Avoid judgment. Because remember, we're talking about judgment. So if we're in the professional world, it's how am I going to be perceived if I give this presentation? Oh, what are they going to think if I give this pitch? What are they thinking about me if I throw out this idea? What if I make a mistake? And so we're really kind of shrouded in this fear of not really showing up, not being enough in some way. And that need to prove our competency, that need to prove our enoughness, our need to prove our worthiness, our need to prove our deservingness. It is the biggest leecher of joy and vitality. It all maps back to the fear of rejection. But this is going to sound so stupidly simple. It's maddening. It's almost annoying. But this is where one of the biggest opportunities we have is to just decide, well, what if I'm already complete? What if I'm already complete? And I'm just living this life and I'm having fun. What if I could just decide that I'm already complete? Now, the reason this is hard to think that we can't do that. Hold on. No, we can't do that because all of our life we've been conditioned to prove our worth. And so perceptually, we have exercised this muscle of proving, which means our worth is conditional. So that's where the power of this choice is. We make our self-worth, this relationship with ourselves, we make it conditional. I can't consider myself enough or complete, which truly is the epitome of self-love. I can't experience that unless I XYZ, unless I get this promotion, unless I get a partner, unless I have we make our sense of self conditional. And so if our sense of self is conditional, Well, that's a shame because you'll never, ever find the right set or right amount of conditions or evidence to prove yourself into a feeling of wholeness. And so to just decide, wait, I'm just going to decide to know that I'm enough. Well, hold on. That seems too simple. It is that simple, but it seems unfathomable because you're so used to proving. But if you were to just decide it, the proving game stops. And so that's where the knowing and the believing come in. So the really what's so profound here, and I'm a stickler about this when I'm working with folks, the difference between saying the word, I believe I'm enough versus I know I'm enough. I'm a stickler when it comes to the choice in words because there's so much behind that. Because if I say I believe I'm enough, I'm automatically conditional because belief is predicated in duality. Belief requires proof. Like, for example, if I say, oh, I believe it's a lovely day, right? That belief, I would never assert that without conditions. It's like, oh, look, there's a lovely breeze and there's no clouds and people are on the low. Okay, it's a lovely day. So I need proof to assert a belief. But the problem when our sense of self is in that paradigm of belief, if I'm looking for proof to prove myself enough, the problem with proof, I'm going to always see an equal amount of counterproof because that's just how it works. That's just how it works.
Yes.
For example, if I needed light, this is silly, but if I need light, like literally the sunlight or light to prove that I'm enough, well, I better see dark because if I don't see dark, then I don't know light. And so if I see dark, I'm proving I'm not good enough. So we end up on this perpetual, unending, unwinnable game of on a constant search for completeness in a world that we do not create, in a world of conditions that we have no control of, and it will never work. And that's the trick. And that's the trap of belief. And so you literally have to make a leap of faith. And there's the proverbial leap of faith. You literally have to hop from believing to knowing. And knowing is just a choice. It's a choice despite the conditions. And that's what makes this so maddeningly simple. You just choose it. And then I was like, well, I can't because I need to work for it. No, well, now you've just put yourself in belief. Knowing is a choice that you choose despite the evidence. And it's just a choice. Like how many times, Claire, have you been in an argument maybe with your partner and it's back and forth and it's like, no, it's this. No, it's this. No, it's this. Wait, I just know. And then they present you with all of this evidence and you're like, I just know. I just know. Right. And so you rest in the knowing that is a choice. And so if we're doing that with certain things like our name, I mean, this is a silly example, but let's imagine that you get a hold of your birth certificate. Let's imagine you had a counterfeit birth certificate all of your life and you come across the original one and your name is Edwina. You're like, what? And they're like, okay, you're Edwina now. What would you say? I'm like, no, I'm Clara.
Yeah.
Like, nope, look, here it is on paper. You're Edwina. And you'd be like, interesting, but no. And there would be no amount of proof that would make you choose otherwise because you just choose it. That muscle to choose, it's so simple that it almost feels impossible. And this is true freedom. And so that's how these two work hand in hand.
Wow. I mean, so many things on my mind. 100% agree with proving just from my own experience when I've tried, and I'm sure everybody, I always believe if I had that feeling, there's many more people on this planet who probably had that feeling too, right? So when I realize I'm trying to prove myself to someone, I cannot be in my best.
Yeah.
So I just kind of feel blocked. I get more nervous. I get more sloppy. I just start making more mistakes that I don't even typically do. It's like this pressure. Maybe actually now that I say it, I wonder if that's one of the reasons why I say I've never been as good of a tennis player as I could have, because I've always been trying to prove myself to my parents and my coaches.
100%. That massive unlock right there. You just figured it out. Bravo, friend.
It's funny. These discussions, really, I learned so much. So thank you, Amy, for walking this through me. But I don't think that comes 100% agreeing to knowing, and it should be so simple. I actually argue this. We argue with my partner quite often about this. And he always laughs. It's funny at the tennis players. I was like, he's never played tennis. Like, you tennis players are just so soft. You lose a point And then, you can hear the commentators in Australian Open and went, oh, he lost this point or game. Now his confidence is down. It's like, you just need to know you're confident. Like, you can just lose confidence from losing a point or a game. Like, what are you going to do in life? Something happens, you suddenly lose confidence because you just own your confidence, that you know it, right? So it's just one of the examples. And so agree, it should be so simple. Yet it is, I think, so hard just to imagine that and just move from the last point, as you said it, from believing to really knowing. And for me, it almost seems like really sinking into the center of, I own it now.
Yeah.
What are your tips for achieving it? Do you, by reading the book and exercises, is that how you get there? What other tips?
Sure.
Like, how do you really realize this knowing?
Definitely read the book.
I agree.
At this point, I'm a cliffhanger. Everybody just has to go read the book. There's a secret to life right there. This is why I say living on purpose, always on purpose, is a practice, because when we condition ourselves to proving and living in the paradigm of belief, and we're constantly in this conditional paradigm where we need conditions in order to feel self-worth, we're very practiced in that. And, in the same way, are you right-handed, Clara?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to guarantee you brush your teeth with your right hand.
Yes.
And in the same way that it would take a lot of effort to attempt to brush your teeth at night with your left hand, to remember to do it, and then to actually do it, would be a lot of effort, because one, it's going to be so instinctive to you, you're going to forget. Oh, wait, I've got this initiative. I've got this whole thing here where I'm trying to brush with my left. You're going to naturally forget because you go on autopilot. And so then here you're brushing your teeth. It's so uncomfortable that you're like, I don't want to, there's really no pull to continue the process. And so you don't get much payoff in the early parts of learning to brush with your left because it's so clunky. But I guarantee if you attempt with some structure and a bit of rigor, after a period of time, it will become very natural. And in fact, it might be the new way you brush your teeth after a period of time. Now, to make this leap from conditional association and conditional living belief to knowing, it's not nearly as uncomfortable as brushing your teeth with your left. In fact, it's actually way more pleasurable. But the work really is to catch and come back, to catch the discomfort of what it feels like to prove in a moment, and to come back to that feeling, I know myself complete, which it's a feeling more than a thought. It really is to catch and come back. And that's why we meditate. The same muscle to catch and come back in a moment during the day is that same muscle we're exercising while meditating. And after a period of time, it's just easier to stay in this state of knowing about self-enoughness and worthiness and deservingness, that this is where you stabilize. But it's a practice, right? Neuroplasticity is real. We've got neural networks in support of our habits and our ways of being. And if we want to change them, it's just going to take time and effort and attention sustained in a new way for a period of time so that we create new neural networks.
So what I'm hearing is it may become that we train it and know it all the time, but especially at the beginning, you're going to shift away and shift closer to it. And what I'm hearing, like the meditation and creating that awareness. And you talk a lot in the book about having inner dialogue. That has definitely been something, especially since kind of that experience I had in the past. I had to work really hard because the whole situation, it's dragged on. Actually, it was a culmination of quite a period of time that put me in such a negative state that I was so consumed and I couldn't almost think positively at a point where I actually consider myself to be a very positive person, but I was just consumed with the negativity. I had to relearn how to create a healthier internal dialogue with myself and catch, I guess we'll dive into actually meditation. That's my next point here. But practicing meditation and slowing down and being aware of your thoughts and the internal questions or judgments you may have will kind of push you into, is this dialogue healthy, or do I need to reroute it to creating a better one? Right. And sort of that's what I'm hearing. It's once you get better at it, it'll be easier to reroute it faster or sooner than when you get to the whole negativity and proving and not having confidence and be closer to the center. But it seems like it's a continuous practice.
Totally.
And it becomes easier with time. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And it's a fun practice because, some people think that, oh gosh, it sounds like a lot of work. This is super fun because it's really about harnessing your focus. Mm-hmm. But it all really predicates on your sensitivity to how you feel. Because if you've got an inner dialogue running that's not serving you, well, what does that actually mean? It means you feel crappy right then and there.
Yeah.
That's it. Why else would we want to change our inner dialogue? Well, because it makes us feel bad. But we become conditioned to feeling crappy that we don't catch the inner dialogue. That's the source of how we're feeling. And then we don't use our own power to change our inner dialogue. And it's often because that muscle is kind of weak. But again, it's heightening the sensitivity to how we feel so that we can catch that inner dialogue. It's like, oh, wait, is this true? Is this true that I'm going to fail at this next event here? Is this true that in this next meeting, these people are going to judge me? Is it true that the next conversation I have with my stakeholder is going to be really contentious? Is that true? Why am I entertaining these thoughts? Well, it just happens. Our minds are a mess. My gosh, they're messy. And thoughts think themselves. It's just nuts.
Yes.
And that's the first thing I always invite people to just decide that, you know what? There's going to be crazy stuff going on. I mean, are your dreams crazy? My dreams are crazy. I wake up and I'm like, what was that? Whoa. And so clearly there's very interesting things going on while we're asleep, and very interesting things going on while we're awake that we're not directing, we're not creating. They just happen. But we get to decide what we're going to attach to, what we're going to focus on. And that's where meditation is a really powerful way of making that possible.
Thank you. You have everyday meditation practice that you just created a schedule for yourself. What would you suggest others? What worked best for you, even some of your practices that you want to share with the audience?
It's one of these things where it's a thing that layers on itself, where it's a bit of a process to create a relationship to meditation. That's been my experience. And the first is you have to get to the point where you truly want to do it, where it's not a conceptual want, it's an emotional want, where it's not like, oh, this sounds like feel it out, right? So it's not like, oh, this sounds like a good idea. I'll do this because it's good for me. It's like, oh, actually, I really want to do this because I get what this is about. And so in order to get to that emotional want, when we get to an emotional want, then we've got the motivation to really see it through, to create structure, to actually do it. Now, to get to that emotional want, I have found it can be helpful for people to see really what's going on and how this practice really serves you. Because most people have this misconception that meditation is that you're supposed to have an empty mind the whole time. And if you don't, you're doing it wrong. And that it's fairly simple. You sit down, simple for other people. It's not simple for me. And I get to this place of enlightenment in a period of time, and it makes me a better person, and it makes me feel amazing. And we have all these misconceptions about it. And so the first thing I always say is, you're always going to feel like you're doing it wrong. And it's because your minds are messy, but that's okay. Because it's a ritual. It's a sacred ritual you have with yourself that honors you and this idea that you are here and you're going to live on purpose. And so it's a practice that sometimes it feels great. Sometimes you feel like you don't know what you're doing, but it's consistent practice that you say, okay, I'm going to do this because it's like going to the gym for my brain. Because in meditation itself, what I recommend in the book, I mean, there's many ways to go about it. There's so many. I mean, I could list all the multiple forms of meditation. And so I'm talking about a very basic, simple mindfulness practice.
Yes.
But if this is interesting to anybody, I explore all the various ways in which we can meditate. But one of the ones I got started on that made this so wonderful for me was just a mindfulness meditation where you decide, okay, I'm going to sit for a period of time. For those getting started, start easy, 5 minutes daily. And you'll find that you'll want to kind of increase it after a period of time. And, if you find after a year, you're still at 5 minutes, that's fine. There is no way this should be. There is no way you should go about it. We got to let go of this resistance to it. It's just this idea that you do it because you want to and because it's serving this muscle that's going to allow you to know your wholeness and completeness. Okay. So you pick a period of time, say it's 5 minutes. You sit down, you're intentional, you're present, right? Because you're essentially saying, I am here right now, and I'm going to go through this process for me. And in that, say 5 minutes, you pick one focus. I'm going to focus on the sound of the fan. And that's it. With no thought, I'm just going to notice it, observing, that's it. Or I'm going to notice just how it feels, the air going in and out of my nose. One point of focus, that's it. Now the goal is to be with that point of focus without thought during the 5 minutes. But here's the reality. You'll be with that point of focus for a few moments, and then you're going to be thinking. You can't stay there. You're going to naturally start thinking. So your job, the real job, isn't to stay there. Your job is to catch. Oh, I'm thinking about lunch. Okay, like back to my breathing. And you might be here for a couple seconds, and now you're thinking about, am I doing it wrong? Am I doing it wrong? Oh, my nose is plugged. Oh, I need to go to the store. I got to get Afrin. And then you're saying, no, I'm thinking. And then you come back. So every time you catch and you come back, it's like doing a bicep curl. So that when you're out and about in the world, you can catch when you're proving yourself, trying to prove you're in the paradigm of belief, and come back to a knowing. So it's the same muscle. And, meditation, I've been doing this for years. And it's one of those things where you can't quite put your finger on what is shifting, but there's shifts and you can feel it, you can experience it. And it's just so wonderful, beautiful, and pleasurable that, after a period of time, you're like, oh yeah, meditating is like brushing my teeth. It would be weird if I didn't do it in the morning.
Yeah. What just resonated with me from what you described, it seems like it's really a tool for better self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And when you're during the day or whatever situation you might be in, and bring the monkey mind, what people sometimes call back. I was like, is this thinking productive? Do I want to shift the focus or ask a different question and uncover more of the truth that you talk about actually in the book as well? Like, is this really true, and how to navigate around getting into the truth? How long have you been doing meditation, Amy?
I got really serious about it in high school. And I would go to meditation retreats, but it's funny, back then I was so militant about it. So completely missed the point. Like, I'm going to be the best meditator. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be so good. I'm going to find enlightenment. It was really funny. But it started then, and I would say I had a relationship to meditation that wasn't regular, but it was a part of me. And it wasn't until, I want to say, definitely when I went back and got my master's in transpersonal psychology. So that was in 2009, 2010. That's when, during that shift I went through, I was like, this is who I am. And I need to honor that and take it more serious.
I'm actually curious. I've been practicing some sort of meditation probably since, I'm not very good at timing. I would say 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Has your practice evolved? Like, as you look at your years, like, I'm curious if it has changed, or if you're more, today I feel this way, I'll do sort of this type of meditation, or this is what I need. Do you have different practices, or do you stick with one?
No, I love to learn. Mm-hmm. I love to explore. I love to listen to the teachers on this. I really lean towards Buddhism and just the teachings of Buddhism and certain meditations that they like, Anapanasati, and there's various ways of going about it. I read a great book that was published a couple of years ago. It's called Altered Traits. It's by Richie Davidson and Daniel Goleman. It's all of the science behind meditation. It's a fabulous book. And it really helped me see that, if we want to get good at this, we kind of have to take it, I hate to say take it serious because that sounds contradictory, but, we get better with a teacher. We get better when we are structured about it. And when we go off on retreat. Now, because I haven't had the luxury of being able to go off on a silent meditation retreat for a while. I'm a mama. We're in COVID. And so retreats are not in my world at the moment, but I would say, yeah, I'm constantly learning and exploring. But again, I feel it out, right? So I'm eating my own dog food here. I'm listening to what the teachers have to say. And I'm also feeling out what feels right for me and what feels like that expansive feeling versus the should. Like, oh, I should be practicing this for 6 months before I move on. Well, that's a should. Should according to who? No, I'm going to focus on this meditation. And then I might have an intention to do it for a period of time, but then I wake up and I'm like, nah, I want to do this one. And I change my mind.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I love that example. One of the reasons I'm asking is mine has evolved quite a bit. And I actually think everybody needs to have that experience. Oh, I'm going to be a great meditator. And I'm going to get into the space. I think that's the beginner mind sort of frame that we catch ourselves. And if you keep practicing, you sort of realize, well, it's not really productive and you just keep going. I think it's part of the meditation journey. So I definitely gone through that phase as well. And now I'm sort of more, I really want to encourage and agree with your perspective, the feeling it out, especially for meditation practices.
It's so
at least for me, has been super important. And oftentimes it's, okay, today I want to do meditation, maybe listen to my favorite app and just see what narrating they have and do the 10, 15 minute. Or the next day, I just want to sit in stillness with my cup of coffee and take 15 minutes in the morning and drink my coffee. Or the next day it could be, oh, I want to start my day with reading Amy's book. And that's like my meditation to start my day. So I found just a few different things to pick from my repertoire sort of as I go. And I would agree, there's no right way. It's only your way. So
that's right. And it's funny. My husband and I talk about this. He practices in the morning, he does 15 minutes in the morning or 10 minutes in the morning, but he's very clear that his real meditation is gardening.
Oh, yeah.
And that is really what works. That is so aligned with his soul and his heart. Now me, no way, Jose. Like that is not at all my interest. Like I would find no pleasure in a reflective practice in gardening, right? I would much rather sit on a cushion and find that. So we're going to find it in other ways. Last thing I'll say about meditation, and because I always offer this to my clients, I have had the Calm app. I think since when it was created, I really like the Calm app.
Yes.
There's so many apps, but on the Calm app, there's a program called Learn to Meditate in 30 Days with Jeff Warren. I think it's fantastic.
Jeff is great.
And I feel like if there's not a perfect complement to the way I think about all of this, it's this guy. I'm like, wow, were we twins separated at birth or something? I really like his program and it's so approachable. So on Calm, if you want to take this serious, it's Learn to Meditate in 30 days, every day for 30 days. It's about 10 minutes and he gives you a way of thinking about and practicing and relating to meditation that just is really healthy and really, I think, approachable. And so, I recommend that.
I've tried the app. I agree. Jeff is great. He has very good tone, good narrator. That's another thing that feels important for me. Somehow I need to be able to relax. So the voice of the coach or who's guiding you, or at least for me, it's super important. So you want to find some that you somewhat resonate with. And Sam Harris's Waking Up app is actually really great. He has some good one I recommended to a few friends. So moving to the last few questions here, Amy.
Yeah.
I love your book, Side Effects of Living on Purpose, maybe to close it with. Just from me watching you, it's definitely passion and energy. I would just add those two. And I do have a quote from the book here. Appreciation is your fuel. Joy is your guide. And love is your purpose. I loved it. I wrote it down. But what are other side effects of living on purpose?
Thank you for asking. And this one is so powerful. It's so subtle, but it's so powerful. And it's inevitable when you really, truly make the leap and you get to this place where you truly come to know your wholeness and completeness. What ends up happening is judgment goes away. I mean, at a profound level, judgment of self and judgment of others, because the only way we judge others is when we're judging ourselves. But if we're judging ourselves, essentially we're attached to this idea that we're not good enough, which means we're not knowing our wholeness and completeness. And so to judge others is not a fun thing. To judge ourselves is not a fun thing. And in fact, I am certain that a lot of the turmoil that we experience in the world, and the reason why the world feels the way that it does, is because there's just so much disconnection that stems from ourselves. We're disconnected with what's really true, that it creates all this judgment and resistance and pushing against and shoulding on, right? As this, you should be this way. We shouldn't do that. It's a lot. But when you truly take this on, you can't look at another and not know their wholeness and completeness. And this sounds extreme because we could look out to people in the world and be like, but think about so-and-so in charge, or think about, no, they're not whole and complete. And I say they absolutely are. They were born whole and complete, and they are currently whole and complete. The problem, the opportunity, is that they have forgotten. And they are so gripped by a fear that they are not good enough, that they're a loser, that they are not competent. And they are so completely blinded by it that they've created this reality around them, and it causes the behaviors that they have. But underneath all of that fear and false belief, they're actually whole and complete. And the reason for the dysfunction that we're experiencing has nothing, it's just simply the fact that they have forgotten that and they're disconnected from the truth. So when you know this deeply, when you look out to the world, all that's left is empathy and compassion. You look to others and you see clearly, wow, they are whole and complete, but they are gripped. They are suffering. What must they be believing about themselves to show up this way, to act this way? So even if someone is a butthead to you, you don't take it personal because you know it has nothing to do with you. And so that's, again, another side effect. You're never threatened. You can't take anything personal. You get what's really going on. What I find is that when you're in this state of being, when you truly know one's wholeness and completeness, there is natural affinity to everyone that comes your way because everyone on the planet just wants to be seen. And when you can truly see another, I have yet to experience a situation where, there's no affinity in that interaction because it's true seeing. Defenses melt away. It's really profound. It's really profound. And this is going to sound so saccharine and so Pollyanna-ish, but if we all just minded this relationship we have with ourselves and really did the work to know our wholeness and completeness in the way that we're talking about, we would heal the world. We really would heal the world.
I love that. And that's a fantastic message to close down with. I think your book, I typically ask my guests what message you want to get out to the world, given what we have been facing the past couple of years. And I actually think I'm going to answer this myself because I think your book is a fantastic message on its own. But is there anything else, Amy, you would want to add? Or what are you most optimistic about as you reflect back on what we have been through the past couple of years?
Yeah. No, thanks for that question. I think I'm excited. It really feels like people are waking up. We're in this period called the Great Resignation. And I like to think about it as the Great Reevaluation instead. And people are really reevaluating what is important, the why they do what they do, why they're up to with what they, and I think that the asking of why is so important because it's starting to point back to, okay, well, what's really important to me? What's really going on? Does it have to be this way? I've been following a should. And so I think that what we're going through is a really powerful opportunity for us to wake up. And I think that's starting to happen. And I'm really excited that this book is coming out, that I'm able to get this out at this point in time, because it'd be great to create a movement, around, yes, let's come back to ourselves to heal the world,
I agree. So I know the book you can pre-purchase now. Right. I know I've actually done so already and shipped it to a couple of my friends that I know would appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's coming out in March, I believe is the date, right?
That's right. March 22nd is the release date. That's right.
And where can people get it and how can people reach you?
So it's on Amazon. It's Living on Purpose. And my name is Amy Eliza Wong. You can search that way. It's on Barnes and Noble. Definitely can get it from my website, or there's links to the book through my website. And my website is alwaysonpurpose.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, Amy Eliza Wong, and Eliza spelled Eliza. So Amy Eliza Wong on LinkedIn, Instagram, Amy Eliza Wong. It's pretty simple.
Excellent. Actually, I'll link those resources to the podcast episode notes as well. Amy, thank you.
Well, Clara, this has been a pleasure. That's such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Same here. I appreciate it and giving me the opportunity to talk to you about your book and inspire many others who listen and decide to purchase it.